Do you know what a heat pump is? It sounds like it could be like a car part or maybe a part of your plumbing system. Surprise! It's neither one of those. Buckle up and hang in there because we're going to be talking about heat pumps on this episode of In the House. Let's go. In the House is an Any Hour Services podcast geared towards helping homeowners learn more about maintaining and repairing their homes. I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and today I've got two guests in the studio with me. I've got Kellen Doon, our local Daikin rep, and also Ryan is it Van Tassel? Van Tassel, yes. Man, I nailed that. I'm not known for nailing like last names that like I'm not quite sure. Anyway,
impressive. I've been called lots of things in my life, but rarely is it Van Tassel.
All right, boom. Luckily it's like kind of hooked on phonics because I'm hooked on phonics and it was easy to sound out. Anyway, Ryan is our regional Daikin rep. Daikin is actually the world's largest manufacturer of the heat pump products. So thanks for being here, guys. Everyone listening, as you can tell, like I think we got the right people in here. Now, as we led into this with the questions of like, do you know what a heat pump is? I think most people are familiar with the basic furnace and air conditioners, but for those that don't know what a heat pump is, could you guys explain it to us?
Sure. The easiest way to think of a heat pump is an air conditioner that works in reverse. So an air conditioner cools your house by removing the heat from the house and discharges it outside. A heat pump works in reverse and it pulls heat from outside and puts it inside.
Gotcha. So you still have refrigerant pumping through the coils, but depending on which direction it's going, it's either pulling heat out of the house and dispersing it through that condensing unit outside. Now, when you say it works in reverse, does the fan reverse direction? Because like in the summer, an air conditioner, it pulls air in and exhausts the heat out the top. So in the winter, is it going the other direction and pulling cold air in and like
no, or hot air? It's real simple. It's called a reversing valve.
Okay.
And it just changes the refrigerant flow. So the fan spins the same way. We're still pulling air through the sides and discharging it out the top. Or in some cases, we're pulling air from the back and discharging it out the front.
Gotcha.
But it's just that we're just changing the refrigerant flow. Everything else works in the same order.
So the main difference that people will probably notice is that what you consider the outside air conditioning unit will also be running in the winter.
Absolutely. It is now your outside heater.
So how is a heat pump different than the standard furnace and air conditioner that a lot of people have at their house?
It operates very, very similar, just like Ryan was saying. The difference is that now we kind of utilize what the world is calling hybrid or dual fuel, right? So instead of using just gas to heat or cool a house, or in this sense, heat, we're going to use a little bit of electricity through the heat pump going the reverse way to heat the house as well. So in combination, we're finding the most optimal way to kind of heat a house with both resources, with electricity and gas.
So I know that with a lot of things, like for instance, like tankless water heaters are more efficient. I've noticed that like in other parts of the world, like they kind of like latch on to efficiency technologies a little faster than America. Is that the same case with heat pumps? Are they more popular globally than they are necessarily in the United States?
Very much so. They're probably the more universal heating and cooling opportunity in the rest of the world. We see it with technology and everything else. They are typically more ahead of us than we are, right?
Why do you think that is? Why have we been so slow to adopt that?
I can speak as only personal view, but my personal view on it is this: that we have come to understanding what is comfortable. Kind of the old school mentality of like, this is what my father did, right? This is what my grandfather did. This is what my dad did. So this is what I do, right? I drive a Chevy truck because that's something my dad did. So I have a normal air conditioner because that's what my dad did. Right. And I think that people just kind of stay with what's comfortable to them, and technology that we don't understand can get us a little uncomfortable before it gets us comfortable. Right.
Sure. And maybe this next question will speak a little bit more to like the intricacies of how it operates. But I know that at least here in the United States, like there are different parts of the country where they're more popular. Like we have an Any Hour down in Arizona, and heat pumps are more popular down there than they are necessarily right now in Utah. Is there a reason for that? Is that just because of the climate or how they work?
Yeah, it would be climate driven. So heat pumps heat very efficiently down to about 25 to 30 degrees.
When it's 25 to 30 degrees outside.
Right. And so in those warmer climates, you can easily heat your house without ever using a gas furnace.
Got it.
And so as you get into the colder climates, you need typically an additional heat source, whether that is electric strip heat inside the air handler, which is like a big toaster that just turns on and it just blows hot air, or where we're incorporating gas heat.
So that makes sense, because I think some of the stuff that I've heard people say before is that in the climates where it gets like really cold, if it was strictly a heat pump, all of a sudden that efficiency that you get from the way that it works, if you're trying to compensate for those really cold temperatures with like electric heat, like it starts to get more expensive. But I feel like that it's kind of like combated now, because combining it when you said dual fuel, using a heat pump, but then only using the gas furnace when it dips down below to what the heat pump can efficiently do.
Correct.
Like, does that make sense?
That's the exact concept that we're able to tap into now. Before it was kind of we're kind of held into a certain area to where it could only go on an air handler with a toaster type of heater in it.
Got
right?
it.
And as technology has improved, just like tankless water heaters, I think that's a great example of it. As technology has just gotten better, we're now able to use the combination of that hybrid, right? I mean, we just no different than the car industry. We've now been able to introduce some electricity to it to kind of make it more efficient across the route. We're doing the exact same thing in the HVAC world.
Yeah, the other thing that is happening with heat pump technology is that we have systems that will produce 100% of its capacity in extreme temperatures, so even down to 0 degrees.
Wow.
The downside is really it just becomes those are more expensive systems. But for space heating, spot heating, we have some wonderful ductless product that you could have that be your prime that sole heating source for that space. Up to 1,000 square feet, and that heat pump would handle the heating very easily. The other issue we run into in our climate where we have basements. So our cooling need or capacity is typically about half of what the heating need is. And so there also comes a point that a heat pump just isn't producing enough heat, because we're now trying to heat the entire home rather than to just cool one level or maybe 2 levels above grade.
Gotcha.
And so that's where that extra heat from a furnace comes into play.
Yeah, to me, that the dual fuel thing is the solve that makes the most sense, because gas furnaces do such a good job of heating that, like, if you could take the efficiency of that heat pump and then just use that gas furnace to supplement. And a thing about here in Utah is people don't necessarily realize, but it costs more annually to operate your furnace than it does to operate your air conditioner, because there's many more cold days than there are hot days. And so when we look at the cost to operate the system, anyway, that's something that is just striking me. Having the heat pump, you could probably save even more money, because on those mild days when it's cold enough to like want to be warmer, like the heat pump would be able to kick in and like take care of that, versus like on those, you have less really, really, really cold days than you do.
Right. Yes,
like,
you're right on the vein of what is making heat pumps really take off.
Right.
Like you look at Salt Lake, as a whole, last call it heating cycle.
Yep.
So from like October to March, that we had just, a few months ago, half of those days, a heat pump would satisfy your demand.
Right.
And right now we're just using gas furnaces to do that. So that kind of helps us to lead into how can we overall improve our efficiency on the combination. And I think that's the technology that's bringing us to why heat pumps are really catching a wave, and people are asking the question of what is a heat pump? Why is it different? Why do I need to know about it, right?
So is it just a matter of, do you feel like the biggest hurdle is just educating people and getting this information out there that this option is available?
For sure. It's new. right, most people out west or in colder climates have never experienced heat pumps. They don't know what they are. They don't know how they work. There's been a lot of misconceptions about heat pumps not being able to take care of the heating need. And so it's all of that combined, which is putting us in the situation where we are now. The interesting part is when we look at weather data and how many days of a winter that a heat pump can either be the primary or the sole source of heat or be most of the heat. We looked at last year's numbers and it was like 15 days out of the entire winter that a heat pump would not turn on and you'd just be gas heat. The rest of the time that heat pump would be delivering more comfortable and more efficient heat into the space.
So how does the efficiency compare, like a heat pump's efficiency compare to a traditional furnace and air conditioner overall, since you're talking about that?
Yeah, under current utility rates,
right.
We have factored in that call it a mid-efficiency, not even your crazy high efficiency, but your mid-efficiency heat pumps are more efficient than 95% efficient furnaces down to about 28 degrees.
Wow.
So that's an interesting part. So a furnace never becomes more efficient or less efficient. If it's
Correct.
a 95% efficient furnace, it's always 95% efficient. A heat pump, the warmer it is outside, the more efficient it becomes because it's easier to transfer that heat from outside into inside.
That makes sense. I would actually say that it's the opposite, because like furnace, 95% of furnace, it can get less efficient.
Oh yeah,
depending on how old it is and how it works.
Right.
But yeah, no, I get that's I say that all the time when I'm on the radio. I'll have, because a common thing that people like to ask is like, because there's the old debate about the thermostat in the house, who's controlling it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I got to save some money, so we keep the thermostat where everyone's uncomfortable. And so like the thing is like, you're never going to change the efficiency of your system with the thermostat. Like it is what it is, right?
Yep. Yeah.
You can spend less money by like being more uncomfortable in your house, but
absolutely,
what's the point?
But you're not more efficient.
Correct.
You're definitely not more efficient.
So you kind of touched on, I think we're going to go into like some common misconceptions that you have. And the first one I want to tackle is kind of the point that you made. You said there were 15 days last year where the heat pump would not have turned on because it was too cold at that point. But I think one of the things that some people, at least my wife I know, likes, she has like a heating pad and like I like to sleep with the window open when she's not around. And so like I like it cold, she likes it hot, but she seems to like that hot air blowing on her. And in the past, I've heard people talk about that's one of the differences with a heat pump versus that gas furnace, is that the heat pump is circulating more often and keeping a better constant temperature in the house. And so if you went up and you like put your hand over the register and felt the air coming out, it's not going to feel as warm as the air coming out when you're running a gas furnace, because the gas furnace, the way that thing works is you have to superheat that air to try and like heat the house, and then it's like up and down. Talk to me about that concept.
Absolutely. It's understanding how we transfer heat and how we transfer comfort. It's not just so much how we look at how hot the air is coming out. Because I mean, I was a kid that grew up and on a cold Sunday morning, I ran over to the heating vent with my blanket over me, right?
Yep, I still do it.
So that concept has kind of gone the way of the past, is because when we superheat air, we have a ton of efficiency loss. Loss. So when we're superheating the air, we're actually also trying to heat the outside, because all of our losses are going to the outside. So in order to kind of combat one of the misconceptions, which is the temperature is colder, well, it is. Mike, it really is. It is a little bit colder on a heat pump. The reason why is because in order to get the right amount of heat and the right comfort, we do have to operate just slightly different than superheating the gas, right? Than a gas-fired furnace. We're looking at the opportunity of how do we slowly warm up a house instead of all these hot and cold spots in a house. So a heat pump kind of tackles two things. It gets us more efficient, but at the same time, it's actually doing a lot better job at eliminating hot and cold spots in our house during the heating cycle, which is some of the benefits that we don't necessarily always look at, because we're like, oh, it's just a little bit colder. Yeah, it's probably a little bit colder, but the reality is you're not going to notice because your house isn't going to feel overall cold, so you don't need that blanket to run over to those vents to crowd around them, right?
Right.
So it's the difference in how the heat is delivered which makes the unit kind of get that bad rap, like bad street cred.
Sure.
That it is a little bit colder.
You know who Jim Abrams is?
Mm-hmm.
He's like an industry like legend as far as like residential HVAC goes. And I remember hearing him speak, and he was telling a story about when he was out selling in the field, and he talked about how he went and put in a system, and it was a heat pump for a client, and they were so impressed with like what he did. He was like, "Hey, my mom needs a new system," and sent him over there to do that. And as he went through the process of walking through with her, she was an older lady, like 80 years old, and the son was paying for everything. Like, he had a blank check to go in and, put in a system. But as he was walking around with her, she made a comment. She's like, "I just love on those cold mornings, feeling that heat, like, kind of, it helped my old bones feel good." And he ended up putting in a gas furnace for her because of that purpose, and ended up like, the guy was like, "Hey, how come you put this less efficient?" And he explained what was going on. And so like knowing what you're like looking for in that system, I think makes a difference. And maybe because I heard him tell that story a long time ago, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that's where a lot of my like information about heat pumps is coming from.
It's important to understand. So when a gas furnace is running, the temperature coming out of a register will be between 40 and 70 degrees warmer than what the house is.
Yep.
A heat pump, the temperature is going to be between 20 and 40 degrees warmer. So the warmest heat coming out of the register with a heat pump is the coldest or the least warm that a furnace will be producing. So it is different.
Right.
We do hear of complaints quite often that consumers just don't like. They want to feel that hot air. And so it's important that as a consumer, you understand what that's going to feel like,
right,
and that you're on board with it.
And I think it's the responsibility of whoever is out there like consulting with the person and explaining what this system is to set the right expectations for that. Now, with that difference in temperature, does it just circulate the air more than a standard furnace does? Like, how is it able to like achieve those more comfortable levels without pumping hotter air into the house?
Yeah, so you typically get longer run cycles. So just like your air conditioner, when it's really hot, is running for what seems like forever, right?
Right.
Like it's been running all day long. Where a furnace, even on a really cold day, will still cycle on and off, right? Because we're just producing so much heat into the space that we satisfy the thermostat quicker. Well, with the heat pump, because we're not producing such high heat, it's going to run for longer periods of time, which ultimately should deliver more comfort.
That makes sense. What are some other common misconceptions that people have about heat pumps?
I mean, I would say the number one thing is I wouldn't necessarily call it a misconception. It's just a misunderstanding of when my heat pump is really going to be a heat pump. And we kind of covered that a little bit of like, you're really looking for a sweet spot in temperatures. And in Utah, because we do dip into those lower temperatures, understanding the install of it, understanding how it all comes together is really kind of the misconception. One of the misconceptions is that it installs all this really crazy different way, right? It's absolutely no different, right? We're gonna put a furnace in, we're gonna put a coil on top of it, and we're gonna put a new unit outside. But that unit is now just gonna go. It's going to flow refrigerant kind of both ways. It's going to make it so we can heat the house and cool the house. So when you talk about components, that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is there's a lot more components. No, it's just understanding how we can utilize the components that are already taking those spaces in your home. And that's one of the, I think, understanding when my furnace is working and understanding when my heat pump is working is also one of the big misconceptions in Utah specifically, but I think a lot of climates experience that in those colder weathers because they're like, oh wait, if my heat pump's running and it's 30 degrees outside, it's costing me a fortune because my air conditioner cost me a fortune, right? I think that's a huge misconception on one of them as well. Is like, oh, my bills go up in the summer because my air conditioner's running all the time. Well, the beauty of a dual fuel is that we're actually able to utilize both sides of the utility and keep your efficiency there. I think that's a huge misconception as well, is how much will my bills go up now in the winter as compared they were in the summer?
Gotcha. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
No. That was easy.
I can go down a rabbit hole very quickly.
That's all right. We'll keep it simple.
I'll just wait.
So as you were explaining that, I do have a question. So, because in theory, if you have a gas furnace and you've got this heat pump, you're able to run your gas furnace less, which I'm assuming means you're going to extend the life of that gas furnace a lot longer. Mm-hmm. Since you're running that outside heat pump, do they go out more? Do you have to replace them more often than you do an air conditioner if you're running that, like at least the outside unit? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's the lifespan on these?
Life cycle, right?
Yeah.
It's, you could probably look at it more of like miles on a car than just whether how many years, right?
Sure.
So we might be taking miles off of your furnace a little bit by running the heat pump. Those same miles are just being essentially transferred to the heat pump. So your equipment, your system, the heating and cooling system of your house is sitting under a very similar lifespan. We haven't seen anything that would like have a astronomical data that a heat pump potentially could be replaced sooner. There is a chance based on how often we use something that there is a replacement standpoint there. So if we end up, like let's say we end up hitting this perfect storm to where we never need a gas furnace anymore, there's a very good chance you could replace a heat pump slightly sooner because we never use the furnace. But now you're not replacing a furnace. So it's a hard life cycle conversation because it's based really on how many miles can we put on each device. And there really is, there used to be, and I'm just going to use the car analogy because most of us drive, at least in Utah.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but 100,000 miles, right? 100,000 miles on a car was a really old car. 100,000 miles on a car today is like a starter car. It's like breaking it in.
Right.
And I think that as technology's improved, we're just seeing that kind of sharing of miles improve the equipment as well.
Gotcha. So if someone is looking at, let's say it's time for them to replace their system and they're trying to decide, do I go with this heat pump system or do I go with the traditional furnace and air conditioner? What are the types of things that they should consider?
So we've been having this conversation a lot with our dealer base, not just in Utah, but across the West in the markets that I cover. And there are some real differences between most heat pumps versus other heat pumps as far as how they operate.
Between brands and like the
between
technologies
brands,
that they use.
and even between brands, between certain models. Most heat pumps, so really we'll say all heat pumps except for one that goes onto a traditional home on a furnace, right? These dual fuel situations. The way they operate, it's very important that the homeowner understands, so they understand the expectation and they don't have buyer's remorse. So, we talked about the temperature coming out of the register.
Yep.
Most heat pumps, when they turn on, that fan of the furnace starts blowing the most amount of air that it can for their duct system. Well, when it's cold and your house is cold and you have a lot of air coming out of the registers, it's going to feel cold because it is cold.
It's is it kind of like a cold water sandwich with your hot water heater where like you're using the hot water, and then when it sits for a little bit, when you go to turn it on, the water in the pipes have cooled down, so you're getting cold at first. So the air that's in those registers is cold air, and when it cranks on full blast, it's got to get rid of the cold air before the warm air comes. Is that what you're saying?
That is one of the best analogies I've heard.
I was like,
can we sign you up? Can we put you on record for that?
You absolutely can. I like to consider myself a communicator.
Yeah,
that
is probably
fantastic.
the best example we've heard, because that's what a lot of heat pumps fall into, that category where they're trying to get rid of this cold air. And that's I think one of the things we need to understand when selecting a heat pump.
So you're saying that all heat pumps except for one, that's
Correct.
the way they operate.
Correct.
Okay.
we call
Continue.
that cold startup. It's going to turn on. It's going to blow cold air.
That makes sense.
The other part, when they turn on, that air coming out of the vent, not only is it going to be cold, it's going to be noisy because it's running that fan. Think of in the summertime when your air conditioner is on, running at full speed, you have a lot of air noise coming out of that register. A heat pump runs on those same CFMs or the same airflow.
Okay.
So you're going to have a lot more blower noise coming out of the registers.
Okay.
That's how most other heat pumps work. The one that we're most excited about here in Utah from Daikin is the Fit heat pump. And there's a couple big differences how it operates versus anything that you can compare to it. Even within its own brand, the Daikin Fit will actually pre-warm the coil inside before it starts blowing air. So instead of that cold air coming out of the register, it's going to be warmer, quicker than anything else on the market.
So to steal your analogy, it's like a circulation pump.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Back
Yeah,
to the
I mean,
water
it's
heater. Yes.
it's the technology that allows us to not to kind of break the barrier of traditional operating like an air conditioner, right? Daikin wanted to look at a way to kind of re-engineer the way that we were moving that cold air, and they said, hey, if we warmed up this coil first, then we're not getting this weird burst of already more tempered air than what a gas furnace is going to put out.
Yeah,
So
when
let's
a
make this
traditional heat pump turns on for the first time, it may be blowing that cold, like not tepid air, like cold air, or what feels like cold air for 5 minutes, maybe even as long as 10 minutes if it's cold outside.
Wow.
So that's a long time
That
to be
is.
not feeling warm air coming out of
That's a
your
call
register.
from the wife.
Yes.
Furnace ain't working.
Yep.
Exactly.
So understanding that, like going to your question, understanding that going into it,
Sure.
just knowing that a heat pump is going to heat the air a little bit differently, I think that all homeowners need to be prepared for that conversation. Like
Right.
just, hopefully a comfort advisor is walking them through that, having that conversation.
So
But-
if you get a fit system, this technology you're talking about, does it shorten that 5 minutes to 2 minutes, or does it like take it away completely?
Greatly shortens it.
Greatly shortens it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so what the term Daikin uses is warm coil startup.
Got it.
Specific to the Daikin Fit. The other part is the Daikin Fit is a full variable capacity unit. It never turns on high first. So we were talking about that noise coming out of the register. When a Daikin Fit is in heating or cooling mode, but let's stay on the heating mode, it's going to turn on at a low capacity, which also means less air blowing out of the register to allow it to warm up quicker and just to be quieter. So you're going to get these real quiet startups. Most of the time, it's not going to be running at full capacity unless it needs to. What we're seeing from what our dealers are running against from other competitors is the types of heat pumps and dual fuel systems they're offering. Those heat pumps, they know one of two things. They know on or off. So every single time that it turns on, it's at full blast, whether you need that much heating or not. And so you get all that air noise, you get all that cold air blowing, and the Daikin Fit heat pump doesn't do that. So it's going to be a much more comfortable system. It's going to be quieter, it's going to be warmer, and it's going to deliver much better consistent temperatures than anything else out there.
So I don't know if it's just because of the nature of this conversation, but it feels like we've been talking mostly about the heating function and capability of a heat pump. Is that because the air conditioner side, like it operates like an air conditioner, like a traditional air conditioner, or are there just as many differences in technological like advances on the cooling side?
Oh, that's a great question. So when you're looking at air conditioning as a whole, the same concept that we're talking about on the heat pump side also applies to the cooling side. Whether the units, the different options to them, a single stage, a multi-stage, an inverter, they're going to operate very similar to the heating cycle and the cooling cycle. It just depends on the features and benefits and the scale of which one you're looking at.
Does that mean that the cold air coming out, since the hot air coming out isn't as hot as a gas furnace, is the cold air coming out not as cold as like a traditional air conditioner?
So the great question there is, the concept of air conditioning, understanding that, I think is the biggest hurdle for a lot of people. Air conditioning is actually not putting cold air in your house. It's taking hot air from your house and putting it outside.
Right.
And so understanding that concept helps us to understand what temperature the air is coming out of the vents. When you're talking about all other air conditioners, except for maybe the one that Ryan already hinted to before, those air conditioners are going to turn on, and there's a very good chance you're going to get really close to room temperature air for probably that first 5 minutes of operation till that coil has a chance to essentially cool down,
right,
and now start pulling heat from the house.
Right.
That same concept on the heat pump as we have on the air conditioning coil is very similar. For most traditional air conditioners, you're going to have that same heat pump / cooling delay that we experience on both sides. The difference is when we're moving air, when it's hot outside, it still feels good. When we're moving air and it's cold outside, it doesn't feel as good.
Sure.
And so that's why when we talk about that feature on a heat pump, it's a real talking point because it's something that's different, that's noticeable.
Is the Delta T different?
Not as much.
Okay.
It's you're still dropping the air across the coil. We're either raising it or dropping it.
Sure.
The difference there is we may be circulating 70-degree air in the house, which is going to feel good on a summer's day, as compared to circulating 58-degree air on like a winter's day.
Got it.
That's why people notice the difference.
Okay. Okay. So what else is there anything else they need to consider when they're trying to make the decision heat pump versus traditional furnace and air conditioner?
Absolutely. I think there's a big one in Utah that I think we need to cover.
Cover it.
The biggest one in Utah is, am I making the decision based on efficiency? Am I making the decision based on comfort? Or am I making the decision based on inversion? Because that's a huge conversation that I think we need to start having more and more as we start to look at the heat pump option in America.
Okay.
Especially in Utah, because I think most of us that can call ourselves long-term residents in Utah know what that inversion is and knows about that layer that sits on our valley during most of the winter months. Well, that's made by off-gassing of equipment. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a car, whether it's a tankless water heater, whether it's just a water heater, whether it's a gas furnace, that's what puts all that in our air. A heat pump eliminates all of that. So I think understanding the value to your air quality is one thing that most people should be considering right up and foremost. Selecting the right heat pump for your house is most of the conversation we've been talking about today. Understanding that a heat pump in Utah is a good decision is 100% wrapped around an inversion. I think cleaning up the quality of our air outside of any benefits, values, rebates, anything like that is more important than any of those things that we could take advantage of. I think the inversion is why heat pumps really should be considered in most homes.
Well, if I'm pushing back a little bit, that's because the environment matters to you.
Sure.
You hope that everyone cares as much about the environment, but I mean, I know there's lots of people that don't take that into consideration. So you listed off 3 things. So better for you're off putting less harmful things into the environment.
Correct.
That's one thing that a heat pump just heads and shoulders, it beats the traditional method. What were the other 2 things that you mentioned that were considerations?
We're talking about rebates. I think one consideration is rebates. There are some substantial rebates, specifically in Utah right now, and most of the West, I think, right? I think most of our markets have it right now. So there's more government incentives for you to put in this more environmentally friendly system. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one. And then any other incentives that are out there, right? So sometimes I think this kind of backs up to our conversation of comfort, everything else. I classify those as incentives, right? Okay. The only reason I would select a heat pump over a traditional gas furnace and air conditioner would be one of the things Ryan talked about is because it's turning or moving the air all day long, my house is going to become more comfortable. That's an incentive for me, right? Mm-hmm. An incentive for my wife, an incentive for I still feel like it's an incentive for the environment, but that's because I enjoy breathing air in Utah.
Right.
So those are the 3 things that I think a lot of people in Utah, specifically in Utah, I can't speak for every market, but
so I'm gonna repeat what you said in a way that I'm going to try and sum it up. So you feel like a heat pump does a better job of more consistent comfort throughout the house, throughout the day.
Absolutely.
Okay. If you're motivated by the rebates and the incentives monetarily that you can get back because of the higher efficiencies that those heat pumps are, you're going to qualify for those highest levels of rebate.
Traditional, yes.
Traditional. And then the other one is it's better for the environment because you are eliminating as many of those gases that you're putting into the environment as possible.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. I feel like those are great things to consider. So, so then I'm going to I'm going to draw a conclusion here. If they're offering the most incentives for those systems, I'm assuming that these systems cost more. Up front, anyway.
So they do. If you take a furnace and air conditioner system
Right.
with the same heat pump and furnace, right? So in this case, if we took a Daikin fit air conditioner and furnace and a Daikin heat pump and furnace, the heat pump will be more expensive, but the rebate more than offsets that. And so it ends up being less expensive once you factor in the rebates.
Got it.
So it becomes a better value. The one thing that we've been asking our dealers to be asking homeowners is, what's most important to you? Getting a rebate or doing what's best for your home? Because it can be two different things. There are some homes where the only option for that heat pump are the ones that don't give you all the comfort benefits than for instance, like the Daikin Fit that we have talked about. So do I really want that utility rebate, but I'm going to really sacrifice some comfort? Or in some cases, I can do both. I can capitalize on the rebate, get a top end, most comfortable, best value system out there, and still get the rebates. So it really is a question that you need to ask yourself as a consumer, what's most important to me? And then make sure you're understanding whatever system it is you're looking at, how is that going to operate? And am I giving away too much on comfort for a rebate, or am I able to take advantage of everything?
Well, one of the hardest things I think to communicate to people is because as much as we would like them to think that we're trying to explain things logically, when they see a higher upfront cost, they're just trying to make some more money on me. And that upfront cost, I mean, the cost of everything is going up, right? Absolutely. So that's a real thing that people consider, but it is, and I can totally understand and empathize with someone that's in a situation where they have to make a decision based off of that upfront cost. Do what you got to do. But if you take the time to understand the most expensive part of having a furnace and air conditioner or heat pump or whatever isn't the initial cost, it's the operation of it.
Absolutely.
And so the money that you're able to save operating the thing, even dwarfs the rebates that you get up front. I'm glad that those rebates are there to try and help people offset that cost up front so that they can get into a more efficient system. But you're going to see over the life of the thing, that's where you save the most money on the thing. But getting people to see past that initial cost. So
it's tough. Yeah. Buying a new system for your home is not cheap.
Right.
It's thousands of dollars. You only do it every... if you remained in the home for years, you're only going to do it every 13 to 15 years. So you want to get it right, and you make sure that you're doing your homework and asking the right questions when it comes time to replace. Because if you make that decision incorrectly, you have 15 years of being reminded that, I wish I would have done something different, because you're not going to just buy a new one 2 years from now because you don't like the way that it operates.
Right. Well, this has been a great conversation. I agree that I think we've got to do what we can to educate people on the differences between that, and that this is an option, and that this dual fuel, heat pump, and that the fit system, all of those things are they are great advancements in technology for the consumers, benefit.
Absolutely.
I think that's awesome. We're running a little long here, but we get ready to wrap this up. Is there anything else that you guys feel like someone that we haven't talked about with heat pumps? Anything else you feel like we should cover?
I think Ryan, I'm going to leave that on you.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything.
We love heat pumps. Daikin is a heat pump based company. We have some of the best technology, residential, commercial, but it's important that in the U.S. market, with the types of systems that we're doing, that you understand what you're being offered, right, from whichever company you're choosing to do business with, and making sure that that you're going to be happy with it. And then, man, if a heat pump works, we say it's the future. It is what's coming, and there will be a time that becomes the option.
Right. And we might be a little early in the conversation because I know like tankless water heaters, they're still like, I feel like over the years, they're more common to talk about now and more people are asking for them than they did even 5 years ago. And, you know, but like I can definitely see heat pumps going the same direction as far as like in their popularity and becoming just a better option.
Yeah, I'm seeing in Colorado, another market that I cover, there are becoming new subdivisions that are going all electric. So it's coming. California is that way. You cannot put in a gas furnace in a new home. Now they have a more mild climate, but Colorado is a colder climate, and that is becoming the norm of new construction of they're getting away from gas heat altogether. So heat pumps are coming. It's very good to understand them. It's a great system. Just make sure you're buying the right one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So just to kind of like, I mean, whether this is going to be seen.
You said you didn't have anything to add.
Well, he's talking about.
I'm just
right.
kidding. Go ahead.
No, the reality is as he's talking, it makes me think of like, we're doing a very good job talking about the heat pumps and the values and everything else. We can only speak generally, right? We can only be as generic as we can sitting here behind this desk. Sometimes the answer for somebody's home is going to be a heat pump is not the right fit. And that would be kind of like my make sure we understand that you're working closely. Ryan's covered this a few times. You're working very closely with Any Hour and its comfort advisors and making sure that the option I'm picking is the right option for my house and not letting everything else kind of dictate my decision. Because there are a lot of great things we've talked about, whether you're looking at the rebates, the incentives, whether it's air quality, whether it's the efficiency. There's lots of things you can sum up, but sometimes your home, everyone's home is unique to them, to their lifestyle, to their setup. So don't be like ashamed or embarrassed if your house is not a heat pump house.
Right.
Because we are a gas furnace still. Market.
Right. Well, we're going to put a bow on this. Kellen, Ryan, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for all of your input and your expertise on this. For those that are listening and watching, thanks so much for your attention. I hope you found this helpful. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, whatever you have to do to make sure you're notified next time we release a new episode of In the House. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. See ya.